And welcome on in to Huddle Up with Howard here on ClaibsOnline.com. I'm Joe Roderick, in for Mike Claiborne this week, joined alongside by Mizzou Hall of Famer Howard Richards. Howard, hello.
Hey, Joe, how are you? It's always good to see your face, my friend, especially when I see Claibs all the time, but I don't get to
Right.
see you nearly enough. So
It's nice to switch things up a little bit and kind of move around and do a few different shows here on Claibs Online. And if you haven't checked it out yet, check out the all-new look for ClaibsOnline.com. Before we get started, Howard, I know I see you're still in dress shirt and the blazer as you just came from the funeral of a dear friend of yours.
yes, Mr. Martin Matthews, who's one of the co-founders of the Matthews-Dickey Boys Clubs, Matthews-Dickey Boys and Girls Clubs now, which is now a part of the Boys and Girls Clubs of St. Louis, passed away last week. And his funeral service was today. And I'll just say this. The impact that Mr. Matthews had on the St. Louis community, I think, is immeasurable. Virtually every person that ever played little league sports and went on to play at the collegiate level, and certainly in professional sports, be it NBA, Major League Baseball, or the NFL, probably at some point went through the doors at Matthews-Dickey Boys Club. I was one of them, in the late '60s. Grew up with a number of guys that you could just start naming them off, and they've probably had some experience there. So we paid tribute and celebrated the life of Mr. Martin Matthews today. And it was kind of a star-studded affair, but I would expect nothing less for a man that meant a lot to the St. Louis community, especially St. Louis families and St. Louis youth.
Yeah, I know Claibs talked about him as well during our Monday show, the lunch with Claibs and Joe. If you want to go hear what Claibs had to say about him, and I know Claibs spoke at the funeral service today, as well, before he heads out of town to much warmer climates than what we're dealing with here in St. Louis. But Howard, I want to start off by talking about some of the news here from the in the NFL today, because it just came across about 10-15 minutes ago. In fact, I'm not sure if you saw the news yet, that the Buffalo Bills and Cleveland Browns game this Sunday is being moved to Detroit. The city of Buffalo was apparently going to get I mean, you thought we got a little bit of snow, at least over here in the Belleville area this past weekend. Buffalo is set to get 3 to 6 feet of snow. Feet of snow this weekend. So the NFL, being proactive, decided to move the game to Detroit, which also works out because the Bills actually play in Detroit on Thanksgiving on Thursday. So I'm sure they could just find a practice field and just hang out there for a couple days before Thursday's game. So before we get into their decision to move it, I want to hear what is the worst playing conditions snow-wise that you ever had to deal with during your playing career.
It would have actually been in high school. Heavy rains on the field that I played on, for those that know or familiar with the high school Central Visual Performing Arts, where the recent school shooting was, where they used to be named Southwest High School. So as with most of the public high school fields, there was never really what we call grass on those fields. It was mostly weeds. And usually by the time the season started, after, your early training camp was over, there was no more grass, or very little grass or weeds, if you will. So whenever it would rain during the fall, and especially this one particular year, I think it was my junior year in high school, we had some heavy, heavy rains, back-to-back weeks. And I mean, literally playing in mud. After the first quarter, you could not determine which team was which, because we had mud, from head to toe, completely covered in mud. I think the only differential was the helmet colors. That was probably the only way that you could actually distinguish between which team was which. But in college, I think maybe one game where we had a little bit of light rain, nothing on our home field in Columbia at Faurot Field. The worst conditions I ever played in the NFL was probably cold weather up in New York. But really, rain was really the only thing that I think affected us. So I guess I dodged that bullet from the standpoint of what people are going to be dealing with in Buffalo here very shortly.
So you got lucky and never had to play a December game in Green Bay and Lambeau?
Every time we played Green Bay, it was always in Dallas. And maybe that's a good thing because Dallas has not played well at Green Bay at all. And the heartbreaker on Sunday was just, oh my goodness, Dallas should have won that game by 2 or 3 touchdowns. But hey, this is the way it is. So no, did not have to go to the confines of the Cheeseheads in Green Bay.
What this past Sunday in the NFL, you look at all of the different storylines that we saw play out. A game of the year in Buffalo between the Vikings and the Bills, and that was just first off, to start the day, you had the first ever game in Germany, which ended up being an exciting game, and the fans were just so into it and made that an experience to just watch along with the game on the field. Then you go into a Vikings-Bills game at noon to kick off the games there, right into that game, the Sunday game of the week on Fox between the Packers and the Cowboys. You were just going from one game to the next on Sunday, just giving you nonstop action all day.
Yeah, well, it was a little early for me to catch the Tampa Bay Denver game, but man, that Vikings and Bills game, how horrendous of an ending for the Bills. Something that you take for granted, the quarterback center exchange. I mean, you can't start a play without that, right? And that's ultimately what killed the Bills. There was a mishandled snap. The quarterback didn't handle the snap from the center. He fumbled it. The ball bounced back into the end zone, and an alert Minnesota defender fell on it for a touchdown. And that's all Buffalo had to do, was either get the ball, take a knee, either move it forward past the goal line or take a safety there. And there probably would not have been enough time for the Vikings to come back and win that game, which shows you that every play counts. Every single play counts. And if you take anything for granted, you'll get beat. And Buffalo is the latest testament of that.
When you look at how that ending played out, I know we're Monday morning quarterbacking this still all the way on Thursday, but when you look at the options that the Bills had on that goal line play, you have a quarterback that can run. One of the most versatile running quarterbacks in the NFL. Why not snap it to him, let him run around the back of the end zone a bit, and just waste time, maybe throw the ball away to a receiver that's running an out, something out of bounds, and run that 3 times and see how much time you run off the clock before then maybe taking a safety and then punting them the ball with no time left. I mean, you have that option back there with Josh Allen.
Well, it's true. It's very true. So, it comes down to how you manage the clock. And this is why I'm a big fan of protecting. First of all, communicating. You got to communicate with your team, but you've got to protect those timeouts in the second half. They're so sacred. And listen, if you don't have to call a timeout early in the game, especially if you looks like the game is going to be a relatively close one, don't call timeouts. You can communicate with your team during TV timeouts. With whatever it is you need to do. But these guys should be far better versed at just kind of managing things on the field as professionals instead of, burning timeouts unnecessarily. Because at the very end there, you may very well need those timeouts to really talk about a specific situation that you see that you may not have been prepared for. And if you don't have one, then you're virtually screwed.
So that win takes the Vikings now to 8-1 on the season. Really, I mean, that's the surprise of the NFL. I think this year is the Vikings being 8-1. Not the fact that they're good, but that good right now on a 7-game win streak, exactly. And now tied for first in the NFC with the Eagles, who lose. That Eagles loss has to make that Cowboys loss too hurt just a little more, because finally you're waiting for that NFC East to maybe get a little closer, and it does. but the Cowboys fall short. But right now, I believe all 4 NFC East teams are in playoff positions here going into the next to week 11 of the season.
Yeah, they are, especially in the East. I think they're just, the Eagles are leading division, of course. Then it's the Giants a game back, Dallas 2 games back, and Washington 3 games back. And of course, Dallas has to play all of those teams. They'll start by playing the Giants on Thanksgiving Day. They'll play, I can't remember when they play Washington again, but they play the Eagles on Christmas Eve. So, all those games in between, the Cowboys really, kind of have themselves in the driver's seat. If you can go through and get your division game out of the way and get those wins, then you're sitting much, much better than you were beforehand. But yeah, these losses in midseason, late in the season, you've got to do something to overcome those types of losses. Midseason bad play, like Dallas's defense just wasn't up to snuff. But of course, the 2 interceptions is what really hurt them. A lot of people blaming Dak, but really they were the mistakes of the receivers, both Dalton Schultz and CeeDee Lamb. Those things have to be corrected. You would expect that at this point, that communication, that level of experience between those 2 receivers and the quarterback would be much better. Now, things happen, but listen, you can't afford to have those types of mishaps, especially close to your goal line, especially in the red zone.
It's what's really surprising too going into this week. Dallas now travels to Minnesota, taking on the 8-1 Vikings. Dallas is the favorite in this game. They are a 1.5 favorite right now for this game, coming off a loss, going to Minnesota. If it was in Dallas, I can maybe understand that. If Vikings would have just lost, I could maybe understand that. So, what as you look at this, why are the Cowboys favored in this game?
I think because the way that the Vikings have all their 7 wins have come. I mean, literally by the skin of their teeth. It's been amazing that a team that really hasn't always been the most productive, haven't always played the best defense, they are finding a way to win. And that's the one thing that scares me about going to Minnesota and playing. Now, Dallas went there last year and played with a backup quarterback and was able to come away with a win. And certainly the Vikings will be cognizant of that and will want to advantage that. But and Dallas will certainly want to play much better than it did against Green Bay. So maybe I think it's probably Vegas probably looks at it as the Vikings don't quite have it all together. But dang it, if you look at the way Dallas played against Green Bay, you'd say maybe Dallas doesn't have it all together either. So I was a little surprised to see that they're favored by, I guess it's probably a 1.5.
1.5, yeah.
Yeah, in Minnesota. But listen, the folks in Vegas seem to know what they're talking about. So let's hope that they're right. At least I do.
So there are 3 wild card spots up for grabs. If folks remember, they added on to the playoffs last year. So it's only 1 bye in the playoffs for that number 1 seed. Then everybody else is playing. So as you look at the standings right now, you mentioned it. It's the Giants, it's the Cowboys, then it's the 49ers and the Commanders right there with 5 wins each. Green Bay is sitting there at the 5th seed right now. So they're on the outside looking in. That win, though, is finally what they needed. They play tonight in Tennessee against the Titans. Do you give Green Bay a chance at sneaking in there?
I'd say you give Green Bay a chance because of one person, the experience of Aaron Rodgers. This Titans team is playing pretty well, though. I don't think that they can go into Tennessee and beat the Titans. So I think this is going to maybe hurt their chances a little bit more. But and I'm not sure who Green Bay has on the rest of its schedule. But this is an important game for the Packers. I mean, if somehow they could win it, and Aaron Rodgers is that wild card. He somehow finds a way. He may not have nearly as much mojo this year. Certainly doesn't have the type of outside receiver weapons that he had due to the loss of Devontae Adams. But it's hard to bet against the guy, And Tennessee, they're just going to have to do what they do, play some defense and get Derrick Henry running. If they do that, then they should not have a problem beating the Packers at home.
And the AFC, for as deep as that NFC wild card might look right now, with that, I mean, it seems pretty set who the first 6 teams are in the AFC and the NFC playoffs as we head into the Thanksgiving games next weekend. But New England, the Chargers, the Bengals, and I guess the Colts. Do we throw? Do we throw them in there? Do you throw the Browns? I mean, the Browns are 3-6. Deshaun Watson comes back next week. I mean, do you give them any kind of chance in this either?
Not yet. I think you have to wait and see. Will they actually start Deshaun Watson? I think Jacoby Brissett has an argument that, for the next few games, he should probably be the starter. Maybe you work Deshaun Watson in slowly to see how he does, but the guy's really hasn't played football in 2 years.
Yeah.
So I would tend to stick with Brissett, but I'm not coaching that team. So. But I wonder what the mindset is of the other players. Would they prefer to go with Brissett since he's been the guy that's led them to? Actually, they've played probably better than the record indicates, I think.
Yeah.
And you got Nick Chubb. You've got some weapons there. They just haven't been able to put it together. I don't know that Deshaun Watson is going to add that much this soon to this team. So we'll see what happens. So it'll be interesting watching, though.
You know what? We know who the top teams are. We know who the Super Bowl contenders are. We're just talking about, that 7th and 6th seed going into the playoffs. That I think both conferences are so top heavy that those 6th and 7th seeds probably don't matter as much. But it's still, there's always a chance they get in there, they get one upset before they face the real big boys in the later rounds of the playoffs. So
yeah.
Always fun to talk about. And you know what? We're probably a week or two away from getting those emails about what all the scenarios are for the playoffs, too. And those are always fun to see. The ones that we don't know, though, the ones that are completely out of the hands of actual standings are what we see in college football. In the college football rankings right now, there are 4 teams that are undefeated. We know that all 4 of those teams will not end the season undefeated because Michigan and Ohio State have to play each other coming up here very soon. So when you look at the standings and you look at the college football selection committee standings right now, as we are 10-0, you have 4 teams right now that are 10-0. How do you see this playing out?
So the 4 teams are Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and TCU all at 10-0. We do know that Georgia's got to play in the SEC championship. They're going to play LSU, which sits at number 6.
8-2, yeah.
8-2, which is interesting. LSU, certainly, if they win the championship as an automatic qualifier, they're going to be in the playoff. I believe that's right. It'll be interesting to have the first 8-2, 2-loss team among the top 4.
Do you think that's a guarantee? You think them beating Georgia? Does that knock Georgia out of the top 4 then? Does that mean Tennessee doesn't have a shot at it anymore after Tennessee's only loss came to Georgia? Does that mean USC has absolutely no chance at making it?
I know. I wish I could get into the minds of those that are on the playoff committee. I just don't know. Because of that reason, the system is flawed, as you know.
It is,
and I'm happy that it's going to be expanded. To me, not soon enough. But this is the problem that you have because of these scenarios that you're going to get. So I don't know. I just don't know. I don't think anyone knows. The playoff committee probably doesn't know. Although they're probably figuring out scenarios, based on who's playing, what they might do. But again, it'll also look like, it'll be determined how those teams play in those games too.
And I mean, when they expand to 12, okay, you get in the teams, the Tennessee, the USCs, you get in maybe the Clemsons. It's 9-1. You get in those teams that deserve it. But then we'd be sitting here arguing who deserves it more between Oregon and North Carolina, where it makes for some fun matchups. You get more schools into the mix, but even at 9-1, I mean, North Carolina's not. I don't see them as a threat to a team like Georgia. And then, Oregon's already played Georgia this year. We already saw how that went.
And they got spanked. Yeah, that's right.
49-3. Yeah. And, they've come back and they've won a lot of games since then. But I mean, that shows you, and yeah, it was the first week of the season, but it shows you just how much distance there is between a team like a Georgia and a team like Oregon, the difference between 1 and 12 and what we're probably going to get when we do expand. It's going to be a bloodbath probably in that first week for some of these teams.
Yeah, I would agree. But it makes it fun. I think that's why we all just kind of sit there and watch. I'm just not a fan of rankings per se, because, most of, and Claibs and I talk about this, most of those teams that are voted on, are voted on by people that probably never even watched the games. Mm-hmm. I mean, how could you watch all these games, in one weekend or a couple weekends, unless you're going back every day reviewing game tape? I just don't see how you do it. So I think they're just going by, what the records are and what the score was. If I had to take a guess, because I know that those voters are not watching every single game. They just can't.
And what are they looking for? Because you could sit there and you could have 4 TVs up. You can have 4 TVs going and you can start watching at 11 a.m. and watch all the way through the night. I mean, it's your job. It's one day a week to do that. But what little things are they looking for in those games? When you're watching Georgia play now in week 12, what are you looking at out of them? And when you look at a team like an Oregon, you go, okay, hey, when they played each other, it was a 46-point difference. What are they both doing different now that, would make Oregon worthy of that 12 spot?
I think if you're just talking about Oregon, you'd have to look at how they rebounded after playing Georgia. How many points did they score? How did they look doing it? How many points did they give up defensively? And that's probably the gauge. Because if you're looking at 4 games on a Saturday, you're looking at one game, you're missing the action on the other 3. So you're not, as one person, you just can't see it all. Unless someone's sitting there with some kind of formula, if you will, and writing all these notes and plugging stuff into a computer, based on a number of factors, which to me, that takes the real eye test out of it by spitting out computer numbers. Because there are a number of factors that to me, you can take a team that looks good on paper or on the computer, but they just don't look great when you see them in a stadium on a field. Yeah. And so that's why I'm just a bigger fan of, hey, figure out the divisions, if you will, conference champions, whatever case, put them in a bracket and let them play each other. That's what I'm a big fan of. Just like it is in the NFL with divisions. And the best team may not be the overall winner, but the team that's playing the best during the playoff run is a team that's going to win it all. We all know that it's not always the best team that ultimately ends up as a champion. I mean, the year the Patriots went 16-0 and got beat by the Giants. Do you look at that season as a failure? Because they won all their games except the last one, the Super Bowl. And if that's how you're measuring teams on Super Bowl wins, then I guess it was a failure.
So we go into this weekend now looking at Mizzou. They will be at home this week taking on New Mexico State. The Aggies? Is that they're the Aggies? New Mexico Correct. Or the Lobos, right?
Correct.
Okay. Correct. How much research have you done on these Aggies of New Mexico State going into this game? 4-5 on the year. Mizzou is 28.5-point favorites.
Well, I am kind of still in my work mode, studying, compiling stuff, looking at this team. They're offensively, I think they're ranked maybe 125, 126 or something, pretty far down the list. They don't have a lot of weaponry. They're playing 2 quarterbacks. although they have a very experienced coach who's got a really good reputation. Jerry Kill is the head coach, formerly
Former Minnesota,
University of
right? Yeah.
Minnesota. Yeah. In fact, Jerry Kill, when he coached in Minnesota, was once beaten by New Mexico State.
Oh,
Go figure. The team that he's now coaching. But they've had trouble, moving the football against Power Five opponents. And I think of the 13 or so touchdowns that they've scored, 6 or 7 of them came early in the season against Hawaii and some other school. So they've had their own struggles, at least offensively. There's a couple of players on defense that Missouri will have to keep its eyes on. Don't ask me to recite their names because, like I said, I hardly ever remember the names until probably the morning of game day when I have to see them enough. But the Aggies will want to come to Columbia with their mind set on sort of spoiling the party for Mizzou. Yeah, if you beat Mizzou, you're beating certainly an SEC team, but also you're knocking them out of bowl contention because Missouri has to win its next 2 games in order to become bowl eligible. Mm-hmm. So it's just as important for Missouri, of course, the way it got thrashed against Tennessee last Saturday. And the defense probably played its worst game all year. For defense, it's been a top 4 defense. So certainly that group will want to prove that what we saw against Tennessee was more of an anomaly. And we'll try to get back to the type of defense that had been playing for the previous 9 games. Offensively, again, Missouri still struggles, but they're showing signs of getting better in places. They should be able to get healthy, if you will, quote, healthy, unquote, against the Aggies. Probably will play a lot of players. I don't know that 28-point spread is accurate or not, but again, the folks in Vegas have a way of figuring it out. So if that is the case, then what I do hope is that you'll get to see some younger players for Missouri that you haven't seen. It'd be great to see Sam Horn, the backup quarterback that so many Missouri faithful would like to see play. And this game is probably the last opportunity that you'll get a chance to see him unless Brady Cook somehow gets hurt against Arkansas, and he would be the one to come in. So I'm looking forward to a big game. It'll be good for Mizzou to get back in the win column, and then with you take care of the Aggies, and you got your biggest test of the year, Arkansas, and that's a game that they'll have to win in order to become bowl eligible.
How important is that going to be to the tenure of Eli Drinkwitz to win that game against Arkansas and get bowl eligible? We know he just got the contract extension, but looking at this season and getting bowl eligible, how important is that going to be for him in the eyes of fans, recruits, powers that be at Mizzou?
Well, I think it's important. I said at the outset, regardless of what happened this season being Eli's 3rd, that this was the pivotal season for him because people wanted to see, I think, marked improvement, not just in one area of the team, but in all areas: offense, defense, special teams. Now, I think everyone made the assumption, me included, that the offense would be where the least amount of worries would be, and that just hasn't been the case. The defense is the unit that has surprised the most people, and of course, defensive coordinator Blake Baker was rewarded because he got a big extension also. But so this being the pivotal year, next season, it would be great to get that bowl qualification and then get to another bowl game, which means that, in his first, he's qualified for a bowl each of his first 2 seasons. So you would love to be able to continue in that vein. Now it's just a matter of it would be a drop off, would be a disappointment, but then next year's the critical season for him, I think. Now more of your recruits, more of the guys on your team are the guys that you brought in as a head coach and a coaching staff. So everyone always says, I'll be better when I get my own folks here. And we'll see if that is actually the case here, going into that 4th season. finding the right pieces, whether there be kids that are coming out of high school, young players, or hitting the transfer portal to find plugs that you have areas that need to be filled in, holes where need to be filled. So I think, year 4 is definitely the critical year for him.
Howard, before we get going here, our weekly picks, our weekly football picks that you can find the results at claibsonline.com. You listen to Weekend Joe, or you can see the standings over at claibsonline.com. You are 4 games back of Frank Cusimano right now. Yeah, Frank and
last
Claibs
week was such a disaster for me.
I
mean, who would have ever thought that those teams, the way they were, the picks that I made all should have won. Of course, TCU did beat Texas. Yes. That was my only saving grace last weekend. But man, Dallas disappointed me, and I can't remember what the others. I've tried to forget about it. So let's hope that this week will be better.
Tennessee at South Carolina this week, USC versus UCLA, the Jets at the Patriots, and the Cowboys at the Vikings. Howard, that's I still need your picks for that too. You haven't sent that to me. The only thing you did was email back how terrible your picks were.
You're the only guy that listens, Joe. I will have those picks to you tonight for sure.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, I did this with Claibs on Monday. I just want to remind everybody too. Our friend Jay Randolph Jr. is going through some difficult times right now. If you could be so kind, go to jrandolphjr.com. You'll see his GoFundMe page there to help out with some of the things that he's dealing with right now. That's jrandolphjr.com. And Howard, I imagine that you've had quite a few run-ins with Jay over the years at many events.
He is just a wonderful guy. We've didn't know each other like best friends, but over the years, through broadcasting, have gotten to know each other. Of course, I respect the family name, the Randolphs, and all of their contributions to the world of sports. And praying for a miracle for Jay Jr. And if folks that are watching and listening, please go and donate because he needs your help.
He is Howard Richards. I'm Joe Roderick in for Mike Claiborne this week on another edition of Huddle Up with Howard, sponsored as always by Ameren, Illinois, and Munganess St. Louis Acura. If you missed any of the live video version of it, you can go and listen to the entire podcast now at claibsonline.com. Have a great weekend of football viewing, and Howard, enjoy the game at Mizzou this weekend.
Will do, Joe. Hey, have a great Thanksgiving, my friend, you and your family.
You as well, as we wish the same to everybody watching here on Huddle Up with Howard on claibsonline.com.
As one of St. Louis's largest veteran-owned companies, St. Louis Acura knows what it means to serve. As we head into the holiday season, St. Louis Acura is collecting toys for tots for the United States Marine Corps and a clothing drive for local military charities and churches. Each donation can earn a gift from our boutique or a discount on a vehicle service or car wash. Please help us help others this holiday season, and thank you for helping St. Louis Acura become one of the area's top 50 fastest growing businesses for 2021.